welcome, Neelam. I've been thinking about where to start with you, to be honest. And the last few days, I've been having this kind of kitchery in my head of all the different things that come together when thinking about how we create regenerative ventures. And how do we create the enterprises of the future when we're looking at systems change, all these like kind of meta level systems, collaborations, economic transformation, power dynamics, all of those things, and the container in which the practicalities of the day to day of running a business or running an organization entails. And the bridging of these worlds. And and I've said this to you in the past, is that I think there's something in a designer, somebody who's been trained as a designer, in connecting the dots of the system to then having the practical application of turning that into something tangible. And I wanted to kind of link and explore, and maybe we get into the kind of the intricacies and the nuances of what that really means. But I wanted to start with the designer mind and how much you think that hasn't just shaped what you've done in terms of career and building your organization, but the way in which you've done it as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Deepa. It's great to be here. I've heard so much about Adda and I have listened to a bunch of sessions, and it's wonderful to see your passion and interest in the entire regenerative landscape and how we can build a better tomorrow. Wonderful to be here. And yeah, on this designer mindset, I'd like to say that even, what is the designer mindset, right? Even the choice of me being a designer was taken by a personality that had been influenced by its upbringing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was on a call about professional practice with some students of Bachelor of Design from Ahmedabad the other day. And just before that, I'd heard Robert Reich, who's a professor at Berkeley, where he had said that, unless I will get through to my students emotionally, unless I can touch the emotions, I will never make a change in their way of thinking. And frankly, having heard some of the big gurus of systems change, people we obviously met through Catalyst 2030, they said systems change is primarily about mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
And mindset comes from where, right? And yes, design education, the key and seminal thing about design education is unlearning, right? That you unlearn everything you've learned through school, because systems make you forget who you really are. That's the way systems of education were designed globally. Think The Wall, Pink Floyd, whatever. Yeah. Right? So, this has been going on for a long time, right? And therefore, design education clearly, and I'm not going to get into a whole detail on design education, but people should be interested in more of that, because the way design education is done is the way all education should be done. Basically, first 6 months is unlearning.
Okay, and say more about what that actually, because people use this phrase unlearning a lot. It's become very sexy. People want to breathe more and they want to unlearn more and they want to decolonize their minds more. But what does that actually take in your mind? Because you've been taught it, right? What does unlearning really involve?
Yeah, to me, I have not gone that much into the depth of Bauhaus education, etc. But to me, the way the architects and designers who, not designers, there were no designers, pre-design education, the way architects and artists and theater people were brought together to build the curriculum, it was about designers have to design for a new system of production.
Okay.
Right? Because it was post-World War I. There were a lot of machines lying empty in Germany, and they didn't know what to do with the factories because arms were no longer being made. And then someone said, okay, let's build new stuff with all this capital goods we have. And that's how the design education actually came into being And the guys who sat and thought about it, and the girls, they were like, you cannot come into designing a product made on a new method through the arts and crafts movement. Because pre industrialization, everything was made by the arts and crafts movement, handmade. So they said, you can't
Mhm.
think like that anymore. So it was, even if you want to do a design or make, you got to start with the dot. Start with a dot. A dot, a bunches of dots make a line, and
Okay.
a bunches of lines make a shape, and that makes a design. That's the kind of unlearning we had to do at all levels. We had to learn how to draw, how to relink our brains, and how it wasn't just learning and unlearning in physical movements of your hand, but it was in your emotions. So we had a
Mm.
course called environmental exposure, where we were just sent out in the middle of nowhere and told to draw and observe. So observe from scratch,
Mm.
observe what's happening in a society. So that 6 months of basic foundation was a great building block. I think everything that we were taught in design was, how do you get back to the essence? How do you get back to the building blocks? So essentially, we were taught on how to get to the fundamentals, to the
Mhm.
atoms and molecules and the building blocks of everything, right?
Yeah.
So we had to analyze a problem, right? And really get to the core, the human core or the emotional core or the manufacturing core or the economics of making that product and selling it. So, whatever. That's
Mhm.
what the design process taught us, how to get to the core of every issue. And
Yeah.
that's the leitmotif that's been in my work ever since then. And maybe that's what's helped us build a model where we had to go down and to the really, really, really basics and really understand the problem from its very beginning. And I remember starting this entire conversation with you, Deepa, talking
Mm.
about the emotional side.
Yeah.
I think it was not just the design education piece that helped us as an organization do it. I will never say me. I will say as an organization, because I've never worked alone. Do this is that I am an extremely emotional person. And a lot of our teams are very emotional people. And
Mhm.
that's where the thread with Robert Reich, I have the confidence to say it today. I may not have had the confidence if I hadn't heard him say what he said. But I think that's really what's driven the growth of this model, our
So much.
emotions and our methodology.
There was something that he'd said that really kind of struck a nerve with you. And when you talk about the emotional, is it the emotional in terms of connection to self, or is it the emotional in terms of connection to what you observe?
No, in the sense that
Is
I
it
still
both?
remember, yeah, I was in design school. I was having an existential crisis. You know, what am I doing? What is life? I was 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, whatever. And I was walking through the aisles of the library looking for help. Like there was no one I could talk to. It was literally like that. It was a big crisis in my life. And I remember I picked up a bunch of spiritual books and I read a lot about that, this and that, right? About how
Mm.
you got to develop all four sides of the human self, right? Emotional, intellectual, physical, etc. But I've been able to put all this together now because when I even chose that I will do design, why did I even choose to become a designer? I had the choice of being a doctor, I had the choice of being an architect, but I chose to become a designer because the design catalog or the brochure that I read before applying for design school was, we solve problems. We can
Mm.
design anything from a safety pin to a highway. And I needed an open future. At 17, I felt I was too young to become a doctor and treat ill people. I remember being on the roof in Ahmedabad, I was sleeping on the roof, looking up at the skies. I was open to listening to myself, which I
Mm.
don't know how much young people do anymore. And I was looking up at the roof, at the sky and the stars, and I said, I don't want to treat sick people for the rest of my life. I want to make a difference with my life, but I'd rather do it with healthy people. I clearly remember
Yeah.
this thought. And then I said, okay, if I become an architect, oh, I don't know. But you know, this design thing sounds great because I can do anything. So in me, that urge to keep an open avenue, to keep openness in front of me was there since the age of 17. And that's how we've always gone on, even at Industree, right? We're not
Mm.
scared. So maybe I have a personality type. Maybe I had a very secure childhood. I was talking to my husband the other day. Maybe it's because I lived in a house where my grandfather lived with us. Because I've realized that most young parents can be awful, but if there's a grandparent living with
Mm.
you who's more sobering, I've had a wonderful upbringing. I've been very secure. And I'm a risk taker. So emotionally, I was equipped to do
And I think,
something
yeah,
with my design education. That's all I'm
and
trying to say.
and I think that's really interesting because there's that being emotionally equipped, but you've also talked about this capacity to take risk and that being a key trait of entrepreneurialism. And what really distinguishes entrepreneurs and venture builders versus other models, right? And we need all those different types of organizations within a system, but that entrepreneurial characteristic and relationship with risk. Can you talk a little bit more? Can you double down on that a bit? Because you specifically went into creative manufacturing. And why creative manufacturing? Why and what were the risks that came up and the kind of adaptability?
So the two, three key lead motives are starting from a meta level.
Yeah.
World over, everyone is saying that problems will be solved closer to the problem. Nobody is going to sit a problem funding out of DC, taking decisions, policy level.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very key thing. Any problem we have solved is because we have sat on the ground, lived with the people, observed everything first on, and then gone on to solve. So the closer you are to the problem, and the
Mm.
more emotionally you are involved, you are with the problem, the better chances of finding a solution. Never has a step been taken in our life, in our organization, which hasn't been linked to the mission vision, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we take things that look very out of scope, and people could say it's mission drift, but it's not. Yeah, it's very clearly focused around what we think, where the solution should be headed in the existing ecosystem. This whole lead motive of practicality, pragmatism,
Yeah.
is also a very important thing in an entrepreneur. You've got to be able to take risks, you've got to be idealistic, and you have to be phenomenally pragmatic. What can get done?
Mm-hmm.
You have to balance all three out.
And when you decided, can you talk a little bit like why it was like that kind of creative manufacturing value chain where
Yeah,
you saw yourself kind of
yeah,
having a role?
yeah. So it was very organic. I'm trained as a designer. I decide I'm not going to work with industrial production. I'm not going to work with factory production, mass production. I need to explore how traditional production happened in our country because one-fifth of our population is still living in its villages. It's actually half,
Mm-hmm.
little less than half now. And we were the largest economic force pre-industrial revolution. We supplied stuff to the world, which was made by hand. And therefore, all these people can't really have vanished into nothingness. I need to understand more about this. That was why I got into so-called artisanal production. And having got into it, I realized I cannot do it the disservice of calling it artisanal anymore because these are definitions which were crafted in ages gone by. So we call it creative production. Um, and it's majorly handmade. And I decided to go and work with traditional communities. And I chose to work in very remote tribal areas. Again, using all my skill sets as a trained designer that again advised from other designers, not everything I didn't do myself, from other
Mm.
people saying, make sure you choose a craft where you work with your hands. I decided I'll choose a craft where I can see it unchanged over centuries, which is why I went to a tribal area. And I went to a very, very, very remote tribal area where it was unchanged for centuries. So I could see what it really was, right? So
Mm.
again, coming to the basics, coming to the dot, coming to the line, right? I did that. And I understood that, and I just asked the artisans I was working with. I was developing new designs for export, etc. So I asked the design artisan, take me to a traditional market where you have sold for centuries, your ancestors. Where did you sell this product? And he said, he took me to the village heart, and because it was such a remote tribal area, I saw with my own eyes that they used to go to a village market. They'll put their wares down, all their handmade wares, whether it's handloom sari, whether it's a leather chappal, whether it's lost wax metal casting, which was a craft I was working in, or whether it was terracotta or anything. And
Mm.
they'll put their wares down, and the customer will come in front of them and they will sell it to the customer, and the customer will give them immediate feedback. This doesn't work, my finger doesn't go in, or this is not strong enough, or this is not. And they artisans were always designers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and of course,
they're adapting to that feedback constantly.
right. And to me, it was very clear that anything I did after I did whatever I did would be to build a bridge between producers and consumers. So even today, it's become meta, and we have a supply side and a demand side, but we are always dictated by these two things, because you cannot keep talking about culture and about artisans and about craft without thinking about the market. The consumer is equally important, right?
And do
And
you
that's
think,
been the bridge, and that's dictated what we do.
and I think there's something really interesting in that because like, we can have a lot of, and we've talked about this because I'm designing this training program for people who want to create regenerative ventures. But one thing that struck me as I've spoken to people from around the world is this, like the intention is there, the desire's there, but the commerciality isn't. And I think there's something about the relationship with commerciality or a fear of it, or part of maybe also part of this, we're imagining a new like anti-capitalist kind of thinking or something. I don't know. And I'm curious to know what you think, where this is where that commerciality is where people go short in thinking about sustainment of their ventures, or the kind of the market of their ventures, or the price per unit and profit margins. Like all of that bit gets a little bit lost along the way, in my opinion. But I'm kind of wondering what you've seen and how you've grappled with that. Because the desire to do good is there, the mission is there, but
Yeah,
the business basics feels where
yeah,
there's that kind of gap, maybe.
yeah. So let's be frank and fair and sensible. The ecosystem for commerciality does not exist today. It's a
Mm,
fact, right? No customer in the world is paying a premium more than 10% for anything that is even remotely sustainable. And it's not happening in a 10% premium from the consumer. This system's change. Therefore, where does the capital come from? If you
yeah.
look at all impact investors, earlier they were asking for 20% return, like a normal. Then slowly they crawl down to 10%. Maybe. Now I'm telling you, there could be just a tiny minuscule bit which is happy with, say, a 6% return. But I'm telling you, these ecosystems are built on non-returnable capital. Yeah? Non-returnable capital is philanthropic capital
Yeah.
or CSR or public
Yeah.
money, right? And frankly, those systems are lying entrenched in centuries old thought still. Okay? So we have been extremely pragmatic. I know I'm not here to tell you the things that haven't worked. I'm going to tell you about the things that have worked, right?
Yeah. Both. Well,
So,
we learn from things that
yeah,
haven't
yeah, yeah.
worked.
So the system is not working. The commercial system is just not working
Hmm.
for sustainability today. Yeah. And it's not going to change unless people have a far superior understanding of blended finance. And let me tell you, no one has any deep understanding of blended finance. Okay, I can categorically say today, and I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. Now, what we did was we could build out, and everything we did was organic. We did not think of anything and plan and do it. Things just happen one after the other, after the other, after the other, which is how life happens, right?
Mm.
So we used a blend of non-profit money, and because we had a for-profit company, we had the ethics and the discipline to run as efficiently as humanly possible. And we had the market strengths, meaning because we had run a for-profit company for 15 years without any access to non-profit money,
Yeah.
We had the discipline to think about markets.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. So we are disciplined. We think about markets. But today, if we are able to achieve and build out a regenerative foundation for 1 million women in this country, it's only on non-profit money. Only on non-profit money. Nobody wants to hear about a for-profit when you talk about a non-profit. So we don't ever talk that the for-profit company shut down. It doesn't exist. We raise capital in it. But donors who give to non-profits want to see just a non-profit. They don't want to see any supply chain building happening out of which a for-profit could benefit. So the only for-profits we have are owned 100% by producers.
But they're still businesses, but they're
They
owned, but
are
they're an
businesses,
alternate, but they're
but let
alternative
me tell
models.
you, from the governance, from every conceivable aspect of skin in the game, etc., having 100% producer-owned company is never going to really make it investable in future. How is growth ever going to happen? Yeah, they're market oriented. Yeah, they're businesses. They're never going to become $100 million because they're 100% producer owned, and there are no capital structures to invest into them. So it's a very fragmented ecosystem. We have done the best we could, right? We've built businesses, but unfortunately, they're 100% owned by producers. And nobody from the capital markets is ever going to invest in them.
Do you think that's gonna, okay, so you're saying that in a definitive way. Do you see any light in that kind of shift
Of course,
in the capital market
everyone
world?
should be
Because
talking a lot about 51% producer ownership, 49% producer ownership, 51% private ownership.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I think I see a shift. I like the one thing, and as you know, like very limited things that I get super optimistic about. But one thing that I do get optimistic about in my cynical way is that where are the outliers who are making these systems work? Or they're building businesses and then changing their models to being producer owned or these kind of trust. Like a lot of organizations are turning to the trust model, right? To safeguard the values and the ethos of the businesses. And so, do we see that as something that happens once you've built a successful company? Or can we design for it from the outset? So, if we wanted to create a new venture today and we're thinking in this blended finance way, can we think commercially as well as, but if we got the business model right, is my point.
Yeah. No, Deepa, I wholly concur with what you're saying. I believe, and there is enough out there to build innovative business models. More than enough. We've built, I think someone in the US has started we have a company in the US, Social Benefit Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that everything is happening. But I'm just talking about capitalization.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And definitely we all must try. We are at the vanguard of this. But capitalization, unless capitalization is happening and on a balance sheet you can show that this company took $1 million of non-returnable, non-financially returnable capital, on
Mm.
a balance sheet it should show that this company took $1 million of socially returnable capital. Yeah, and it took $1 million of financially returnable capital, right? I'm telling you from whatever little I know, for the first 5 years, it would need $10 million of non-returnable capital
Yeah.
to be $1 million of returnable capital, right? Because that's because you end up, if you're going down to really make a difference to the planet or to communities, and that's the beauty of the regenerative economy. It talks about communities and the planet together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to have to do a lot of systems change as you go along. That is why
Yes.
actually your capitalization is going to be very, very dipping towards non-financially returnable, but it'll be non-socially returnable. It'll be socially returnable capital, right?
Yeah.
So I have yet to see a balance sheet that shows me this. That yeah, I got so much of money and I haven't returned the money and I will never return the money, but these are all my social returns. This is the SROI on the social return, and therefore my balance sheet is balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like this tearing, reckless, loss-making company, right? So I think
But that's also a reassessment of value
yeah, absolutely. So the ecosystem is
and
not
value
yet
create
ready.
and what value creation really means.
Yeah. So it hasn't percolated down to business BComs. We in India, we have a Bachelor of Commerce,
Yeah.
or it hasn't percolated down to the chartered accountancy rules, and it hasn't filtered down to when people are looking at balance sheets. So till that is done, we have an ecosystem where we will all keep trying and we will use all the instruments possible to us. And there are lots of instruments, let me tell you. You can build trusts, you can build socially benefit corporations, you can build producer companies, you can build cooperatives, and you can do anything. There's lots of stuff you can do.
But it's understanding which model is right for you, right? And it's understanding these the capitalization, but also the kind of the capital flows in the design of that model. So when you were thinking about building your venture and you went into this distributed wealth model rather than because I've heard you talk about cooperatives, but also you talk about distributed wealth and distributed ownership more than cooperative. Where was the like what was the thinking behind that in terms of when you decided, okay, this is the right model for the value chain that we're going to create,
Yeah.
and the
So,
intentionality of that value chain, I think is very distinct
so
from
we
in
had
your
a
model.
company. Yeah, we had a company. It's shut down now. Industry Crafts Private Limited. Geeta Ram and I are co-founders. We had equal shares. And when I wanted to take investment in it right in the beginning from an impact investor 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever, I was like, I need to put shares for the producers in this company. Like,
Hmm.
I want 50% shares for producers in this company because we sell products made by artisans and they have something called a cultural IP. Because my business would have no leg to stand on if they weren't the makers.
Yeah.
I'm just a designer who comes in and helps them design a better product. But without the maker who makes your patola sari or whatever, there
Mm.
is no designer. I mean, you can go in and design 100 saris, but if you don't have a maker to make it, what's the point? Right? So I said there's something called cultural IP. This is IP they've had through centuries. So they need shares. And no one was willing to invest that money. My co-founder and I put in our own personal shares
Hmm.
into a trust. So I went and I studied the mechanism of how to do it. Because now overnight, I can't just go out doling out shares to people, right? Because the company is getting built up. So
Mm.
we built a trust. Geeta and I parked our shares in it. And because we were diluting about 40% of the company.
Yeah.
So we could only put 26% shares for producers, leaving Geeta and me with 2020 or whatever, right? Whatever the math
Hmm.
was, right? And over the years, that company came to nothing because we realized that when we needed to improve supply chain and improve product for exports or improve product to come to stores, we needed a lot of development finance money at village level to improve
Yeah.
production, which is not going to come out of the profits we make in the company. Simple example, nuts and bolts. I'm
Yeah.
buying a kurta from West Side or from Marks and Spencer's, whatever. And Marks and Spencer's will sell it will buy it from India for $10. Yeah, that's the rate at which they will buy it, right?
Hmm.
I will also be able to sell that in India for $10. West Side will also sell it for $10. Let's not talk about the export markup and all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying there is a price for everything. But I am showing a social return and an environmental return. But I will not get more than 10% premium on my product. And the cost of doing social return and environmental return is 100 times that of just making a normal product.
Yeah.
So the maths of it just don't work. The consumer is never going to pay for this.
Mm.
So who's going to pay for this? Therefore, you need public spending. You need philanthropic spending to do this. Now,
Mm.
as a business, no philanthropist is going to come and give you money. As a business, no government is going to come and give you money. So, we set up a non-profit, right? And over the years, we realized that we would only scale with a non-profit. We have to forget this for-profit because questions were also being raised.
Yeah.
That when we will come in and fund this supply chain, this will go into this company, but that company you own. I said, okay, I don't need to own any company. Why do I need to own a company? So then we made that 100% producer owned company. But like I'm saying, 100% producer ownership is not going to get us anywhere in this day and age. We got to look at efficient and smart capital restructuring there to incentivize people who are interested in sustainability to buy shares and to drive those companies. Otherwise, it's not a scalable model.
Yeah.
One do-gooder is not going to change the planet, right? Or 10. You need it to become a system where thousands and millions of people set up companies like that.
And this is the thing, right? Because then you're building the kind of the momentum for a different kind of mindset, a different kind of finance, the finance mechanisms. And I know that you've been involved in thinking about how you can create your own finance mechanisms or partner with global investors
So a
to
lot of the
create to
design, a lot of design of existing capital structures has come out of places like Silicon Valley and the
yeah,
ecosystem. Whatever your curve and all that stuff, right? But so all that was driven by greed, right? By the
yeah,
bonuses you're getting. Now, what is the incentive to drive this ecosystem?
yeah,
That incentive, that critical mass is what needs to be worked on. And that's true systems change. What's the critical mass of the people who are going to build this alternate system? And let's not be anti-capitalism. Let's not say all
no.
these things. Let's just say that's a system. It's working, right? And maybe we need to study how have parallel systems taken off. It's like design in a way. Yeah, design was nowhere 30 years ago. That's why we all need.
But the thing is, you have created a bit of a parallel system, right? Let's not sell this what you've done
Yeah, yeah, we
short.
have created a
You've
parallel system, but we are practical enough to know how small we are.
sure,
Yeah.
but that said, I think one of the systems that we haven't talked about yet and touched on is actually, even though there's this, like you've created these kind of producer ownership models across the value chain, right? Which I think is unique. Not very many people do that in the way that you've done it. I think there's something about when we talk about systemic shifts and systems change, that move from informal to formal sector for workers, which we know is a massive, I mean, it's over 95% of India population work in the informal sector. I don't think
93.
people realize how high it is in India and the
Yeah.
implications of that, because not only is it a kind of distributed system and the producer owned system and the blended for profit and not for profit coming together, you've also created mechanisms whereby those who previously did not have any rights, did not have any securities, did not have any access to health provisions, all of those things because they've been part of an informal mechanism. That formula, like the implications of that can't be underestimated in terms
Yeah.
of systemic shifts that you've created, right? By creating your own parallel system.
Agreed. So yes, it's very important for informal workforce to be part of some institutional framework. It is super critical. Now, the definition of that institutional framework, again, I'm saying,
Yeah.
is something you can call it the global south, you can call it the global majority. We have
Hmm.
to redefine that definition. All these rules made by ILO 60 years ago, I really don't think they're relevant now, frankly. I think this is something the global north gave us. To be very frank, yes, everybody needs access to healthcare. Everybody needs access to some form of social security. Everybody needs access to, there's a third thing, right? Whatever. Yeah. Social security and healthcare, right? That's the definition of formal work and being part of an institution. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at China, it's got the largest number of gig workers in the world, right? India also now it's just changes labor laws, which will bring the gig workers in. So let's just treat the informal sector as the gig workers, because that's
Yeah.
basically what
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are, right? So India is doing a redefining. They've just done it just last month. They've that yeah. So it's very clear that in India we have the Producer Companies Act and FPOs, farmer producer organizations, OFPOs, off farm producer organizations. Our creative manufacturing producer companies come under the off farm producer organizations. So they're
Mm-hmm.
not working only on the farm, they're working off the farm. They're doing value addition off the farm. They're taking the banana raw banana bark and they're going into a little factory and they're making a value added home accessory for IKEA, for example, right?
Yeah.
So yes, they have access. They will all get access to some form of healthcare, even if it's a government healthcare. Government these days has huge healthcare programs, which are public, but a lot of people are sometimes covered under them, sometimes not covered under them, right? So it's really today, I would say, as things are improving, India is in a very good place. I am feeling very positive about India going forward, right? We will be a far more inclusive, high income country than any other country in the world by 2047. That's the World Bank
Mm-hmm.
is still debating, etc., when we will become a high income country. But say, let's take 2047, okay, 100 years after independence. We will be really inclusive because some of these things are already into motion and all this institution building. We haven't built producer companies out of nowhere. It's an instrument that the government created, right? And so we have an ecosystem, meaning under the Companies Act, there is a cooperative that is a private company. That itself is big deal that we pass
But
such
we
an act.
and India is home to the biggest cooperative in the world, which is Amul,
Absolutely.
and the milk
Yeah.
producers in
Yeah.
Amul. But what is interesting to me is that as much as a success story that Amul is, right, with dairy farmer membership, that scale hasn't been achieved elsewhere.
Yeah. Because milk is a commodity. Milk every householder drinks. It's going to get a little tough after 20, 30 years with the amount of chemical, if there is in the
Yeah.
milk, etc. They're going to have to do a shifts around more regenerative milk. Hopefully they'll get there. That's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the least of our problems. But I believe that wealth creation and the fact that we've pulled, I was seeing a recent World Bank report that only 10% of the country now is in abysmal poverty. Only 10% of us are in abysmal poverty now. We've actually pulled a mass of people out of deep poverty because I would say because every farmer, because we've got the world's largest smallholder farmers, 140 million, and they're not letting go of their small holdings, right? The way other
But
societies
but
having
no.
a cow, they're all producing milk. It's
Mhm.
all going to a co-op, and then they're all migrating for work. So we have managed to build a more inclusive society. It's getting better because of the lot of the public programs for health, social security, which other than the co-op giving to them, they can also avail of. See, what do you mean by having people under an institutional umbrella?
Mhm.
COVID taught us that. An institutional umbrella is that they can access, we can even help them get access to government schemes. There are enough government schemes out there. So that's what, so the need for the informal sector is access to healthcare, social security, and an institutional framework. And the government of India provides all three. And therefore, scale in our country to achieve this is not complicated. I'll tell you what is complicated in India. And I'll come
What?
back to Amul because of that. It's
Okay.
markets. Markets. Amul did what it did when it started in this country when India was milk deficit. It had the runway to take India from milk deficit to milk positive,
Okay.
right? Then it had the runway to build we were importing our butter, we were importing everything. So it had the market, and it's a commodity market. Of course, it's built a phenomenal brand. So, having said all that, when we are talking about the creative manufacturing sector, you're
Mm.
talking 100 value chains.
Yeah.
You're talking 100 raw materials. You're not talking a single raw material. Okay. You're talking about a different time and age, right? Okay. Let's come to bamboo. We are building India's largest bamboo program with the government of India. 1 million women will plant bamboo. They will all earn upwards of 100,000, between 100,000 to 200,000 a year. Fantastic, right? And they will not just do plantation, they will supply pre-processed bamboo. They
Hmm.
will earn more through that. Then they will do some value addition, whatever it's happening. Okay. But do you know how China did bamboo? How China became the world's
No.
largest supplier of bamboo in the most non-regenerative way, in the most non-biodiverse way. They planted single species bamboo. 70% of bamboo is single species. We are working with just 1 million women and we are enabling the plantation of more than 16 species
Okay.
because it's a different time and age. We have to look at diversity. We have to look at everything, right? And it's not that it's a different time and age. It's also the thinking of
Yeah.
multiple stakeholders. We think like multiple stakeholders. We think about multiple stakeholders, right? And I will not appropriate that for design because that's one of the key things in the design process that you're thinking about all stakeholders.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's only to do with design, it's to do with the whole of the world today. If you're a regenerative leader, you are thinking multiple stakeholders, right? And
Mm.
therefore, I'm just saying it's complicated doing that Amol again for hundreds of value chains. And
Yeah.
again, when you take a value chain, you want to simplify it to one kind of raw material, you can't anymore. There's no way. You in that one bamboo, we have 16 species. Now, 16 species, each will behave differently. Each will need a different type of machine. Its
Yep.
hardness, thickness, softness, right? Why did China promote single species? Because they knew the entire ecosystem would be designed for just a single species treatment.
But then you've got these 16 different types of species, which presumably will then infiltrate or become the basis of 100 different product lines.
But just remember, it's going to be 16 times more complex. So just giving you the
Sure.
milk example. I'm still at your Amul
Yeah, yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Why did it happen in creative manufacturing? It's not humanly possible that scale and the economies of scale would come over even 20 years in because the consumer for milk only thinks of Amul. But the consumer has got to think about 100 products made from creative manufacturing. There's
Sure.
not just one, right? So it's a
And so then even at a lower scale than Amul, right? There is something about the replicability of it or thinking in that way,
yes, there
right?
definitely is.
And why it's not seen as viable in other because you can again it doesn't need to be the scale as national and as iconic as Amul, but you can create these processes and systems in different ways, right? As models. Um, we don't all have to have that kind of national scale presence in terms of what we design,
Viability is
right?
around markets.
Yeah,
It's an everyday item. A consumer will buy milk every day.
exactly.
But in creative production, is not an everyday item.
And so
It's markets.
And so that tapping into an international, like we were talking, right, about domestic market versus international markets and the implications of that.
Some of the
Do
largest global brands are not
mm,
able to put out sustainable labels. I will not name them. We've spoken to them. Brands out of UK, forget the US.
yeah.
Yeah? So just saying that if the largest corporations are not able to put out and retain and nurture sustainable brands, yeah, it's a big chicken and egg situation. They'll tell you there's not enough supply. The supply guys will say those guys don't have enough patience, whatever. So
But I want to come back to this way of thinking, right? Because you talked about the kind of the emotional, right? And I think there's something about the emotional and the mindset coming together in how you've created your own ecosystem, right? And a kind of a web, whether it's platform like you if it's platform thinking or if it's seeing yourself as part of something bigger and seeing the ecosystem that you're creating, but also the ecosystem that you're existing in, which is not only just creative, but it's collaborative, right? Because I think also people can like start ventures and think this is my venture, this is my organization, and look down,
Yep,
right? But
absolutely.
there's something about how you've approached things where you're constantly looking up.
Yeah, so even the
Does that
emotional
make sense?
side.
That's my observation of how you
No,
function.
Deepa, I'm glad you brought the conversation to a very good point. See, Deepa, emotionally, if you're so committed to solving the problem, yeah, so you will take any path. So it became very clear that the scale path and the value chain path is one path.
Yeah,
It's a path that you can never let go of. And there's a team chugging away at it, and it'll keep chugging away at it. It can take another 60 to 100 years. It's
yeah,
fine. It's all right. Because I believe the future of handmade is truly global, and handmade will come back. And you will see, because the consumer in the global north will want the product, and you will see that you will have small brands doing $100,000 each, because through platforms like Meta and
yeah,
Insta, and these will only perforate more and more and more. Okay, so I see a beautiful future for a small creative manufacturing. That small is beautiful thing.
yeah.
It's going to come. There are zero denial. We do not need we may need the larger molds, we may not. I don't know. I'm not going there. It's okay. Right? Now, emotionally, when you are looking for a solution, it doesn't come purely out of your emotion. Universe acts to make it happen. COVID
Mm,
happened. So when COVID happened, it was a wonderful thing in a way, despite all the loss of life, because we saw the rise of the collaborative approach.
yeah,
And obviously, I got involved. Pre-COVID, I had been deeply involved with societal platform thinking and how we are not going to solve for problems as individual organizations, because you're talking about very large systems which individual organizations may never try to solve for. And I'll tell you what is the other problem with individual organization. It is the fact that you have to grow and build an organization by its very nature. You become more territorial,
yeah,
become more focusing inwards. Whereas what systems thinking and what societal thinking calls for is looking outwards.
yeah,
And these are at cross purposes, right? So everything came together. In COVID, we were forced, right, to even look and collaborate with others. And we did it. And it was a huge learning. I became a very active member of Catalyst 2030, which is now called Catalyst Now. And I learned a lot. I learned a huge amount on how you give up to gain, right? And I attribute a lot to Jeru, who was
mm,
one of the driving forces behind Catalyst, right? Because I studied her personally a lot, right? And we built out a phenomenal collaborative called Creative Dignity. Again, it came out of a need. It was not a person's idea. It evolved from a group of people on a WhatsApp group saying, oh my God, we are so concerned about artisans. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then I just said, anybody who's interested in doing something about it, let's just make a separate WhatsApp group. So we just made a separate WhatsApp group. And then gradually we just named it Creative Dignity. And that was the formation. And
but
Creative Dignity is
say
going
more
great
about,
guns.
yeah, but say more about what, because I think the thing about creative dignity, which I find super powerful, is so I mean, you should tell the story about what it actually did. But it felt like very quickly the mobilization of during COVID, and correct me if I've got any of this process wrong, right? So it was artisans losing all their contracts, losing cash flow, and because they companies had opted out of orders in the most corporately non-responsible ways. And so what was a health crisis was turning into a humanitarian crisis rapidly as people didn't have income. And so creative dignity was a way of creating a artisan to consumer. And I think this links back to what you were saying before about bridging the artisan and the consumer and that connection and seeing that in play. And that's what creative dignity did. But it was a mass mobilization. It was a movement to create access to, like, build that bridge from a tech point of view, from a capacity creation point of view, from service delivery to website and platform creation. It mobilized very, very quickly, right?
Yeah.
And what, have I got any of that wrong? That is the kind of the
No, no, no,
gist
no,
of
no.
creative
You've got it
dignity.
all right. Creative dignity is genuinely a movement. Yeah, we use the playbook of Catalyst now for the first year or two, and that guidance was incredibly helpful. And it had a beautiful anchor from day one, Meera Goradia, extremely
Mm,
collaborative person by nature. And she anchors it till today and will hopefully continue to do so. And it has offered a breath of air into the ecosystem of creative producers because we've been around 60, 70 years, this sector. Crafts Council of India, my co-founder
mm,
is from there, Geeta Ram, and they're celebrating 60 years of Crafts Council of India. And Crafts Council of India was started by Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, a independence fighter who, in the partition, when the people who came from Pakistan had nothing to do, migrants, then she said they have so much of hand skill, let's help them. And she set up all the concerned government departments, etc.
mm,
The sector has, this is such a loved sector in this country. And everybody who's bought a handmade product loves the sector. And there's so much of positive emotion tied with the sector. And our design institutions have done a phenomenal job. We have tons and tons and tons of designers, old, new, young professionals who are deeply interested, who are really there's so many well-wishers for the sector, genuinely concerned, looking for answers. And CD is able to tap, hopefully, into even a bit of that energy. And that's what
mm,
it does as a platform. And the biggest problem for 60 years in this sector has been that there's very little of artisans and the rest of the ecosystem sitting together all the time on the table and talking together, right?
mm.
There is this issue. And our doyens of the sector have spoken about this for years and years and years and years and years. Saying,
So,
why are you talking for them? Why are they not here talking for themselves? Right? Right? And that's it. So that it's that constant journey, right? India is a country of 22 languages. At CD meetings, artisans will come. Then there'll be Hindi, there'll be Kashmiri, there'll be South Indian. And so that journey is always on. But like I'm saying, this is a sector that AI will transform. You will have automatic translation going ahead. You can really customize anything you do for all 32 states, all the hundreds of languages.
mm,
Collaborative work can sound easy. It is incredibly difficult.
yeah.
It is incredibly difficult. Organizations find it incredibly difficult to be collaborative. There are reasons for that because it's a job of the organization to protect itself also. Because
Mm,
today industry has 200 employees, okay? So let's there are certain principles of collaborative work that are phenomenal, which are what? Like you will not become a 10,000 person organization, beyond a point, you will collaborate with someone else to do this. So it could be the government doing this. So all those principles are in place,
mm,
right? And that's what's going to happen in Bamboo, right? We are not going to become a 3,000 person organization or a 10,000 person. We are collaborating heavily with the government. We do not know when we will start collaborating with more other non-profits. We may not. It'll unfold.
yeah.
But definitely we will be collaborating heavily with private sector, right? We will be collaborating heavily with entrepreneurs, right? Now, networks.
Mm,
True collaboratives are networks from day one. CD
yeah.
has been a very true collaborative because there's a network from day one. right? From day one. It was never an organization.
Yeah.
CD has been a success, frankly, because of its one of the reasons, but it's one of the small reasons. It's not a big reason. One of the reasons is because it's got a secure voluntary secretariat. Industree Foundation is its voluntary secretariat. And this was a decision taken by senior people who are in the committee to decide this, that it will not register. Because if it registers, it will stop being a network. It's
That's
never going to
really
register.
that's
It,
really interesting, right?
yeah.
Because I've been thinking
Because then it will
recently,
start looking out for itself.
and
Now
I
it
think
looks out for all its members, for producers, for artisans.
so it's a movement. It stays a movement. And
There's
I've
a
been having
movement.
this conversation a lot recently. This difference between movement and organization and how that shifts the core mission.
Industree Foundation has been a stable secretariat, right? And that's it. And therefore, that thing can function like a network. Industree Foundation doesn't interfere with anything CD does. It's completely independent and it runs as a network. But again, now I'm sharing that scaling this network, how many funders, how, again, the capital structure for scaling collaboratives doesn't exist. Yeah, how is scaling of collaboratives going to happen?
Well,
Because if we are not
yeah.
talking about humongous scale, we're talking about, yeah, now you need state chapters. We just need to keep the sector afloat and bring the right amount of technology in so that all the limitations that the sector has faced for years, they will all drop by and dissolve.
But I think one thing, right, we haven't touched on, Neelam, when we talk about the emotional and the connections, I think the thing that creative dignity really centers around is the word dignity. And and I think that's something that you haven't talked about in your design process, but it feels like that word and what it signifies has been a massive part of that emotional connection of where does anybody decide that a percentage shares need to be the producers and there needs to be representation of the production, right? Who says this? Not very many people, given like you've been going 25, 26 years. And that kind of
30,
commitment,
30 plus years.
30
I
plus
say
years.
40. I started at 22. I am 62,
All right.
63, 40
So
years.
40 years, right? And this, I think, warrants a little bit of you like owning that, I think, a little bit. Not that you like blowing your own trumpet at all, ever, but I'll blow it a little bit for you. But I think there's something in that, like in that design intentionality of dignity of people.
No, I don't own that. You will see thousands of activists, social activists out there who own it. Really, being very frank, Deepa.
Mm,
I believe that in human nature and human society, there are always people who care a lot for others, right? And only thing I will own that I acted upon it. I own that. I
okay.
acted upon it. But this feeling, I mean, humanity has it. Humanity has it. So I would just word this differently. I was sharing with the class of BDES that um, or with my cousin, I can't remember who, that, I finished, I was a designer and I was working, I was doing the tableware of this five-star restaurant called Dampuk in Moray Sheraton in Delhi. And I finished and I did the interior, I did the tableware, I did the menu, and the restaurant was launched. And I came out and I cried all the way in my car. I had bought a car
Mm,
by then, from the hotel to my house, and said, is this what I'm going to do with my life? Am I going to
mm,
design fancy stuff for five-star restaurants? So it's just your calling and you recognizing your calling. Yeah. And I still remember I was telling someone that, look, I was at my aunt's house in Delhi around the same time and I was watching one stupid TV program where someone was handicapped, wife was handicapped, son was, and everybody was wailing and crying. And I was crying. There was tears in my flowing. And I told myself, look, if you're so concerned, if you're so emotional, you should do work that's like this. that helps other people if you feel that's what you want to do. So I acted upon it, right?
Mm.
I listened to my inner voice and I acted upon it. And this is all I tell young people, that don't fear. Act upon what you really feel, and the path will open up. That's it. I think that's my specialty that I acted. And of course, the ecosystem around me was 100% supportive
And I think
to
there's something
help
about,
me act
yeah,
on what I felt.
but I think there's something about acting upon it, which I think that distinction is really powerful, actually.
Yeah,
Um, because yeah, there are lots of people who will do the crying and then not do the doing.
yeah,
And but I think there's also something about having the you also demonstrate a lot of patience
yeah,
of, and the reason I'm saying this is you take something like you've observed, you've seen the system, like something like, and I don't know how much you want to go into this, but Pi and this kind of the platform creation, whereby it was almost like you saw the need. And again, I think this is kind of from a product observation of the gap in the market. You've seen a need, but maybe the market or the ecosystem wasn't ready for it because people weren't wanting to finance it or didn't understand it, didn't grapple with it. There was something, but you've been patient because the time will come.
yeah. Of course, the time will come in small ways. The platform is happening in little pieces because we realized as one big thing, it will not happen. And you also learn by the time you've been 40 years around that
Yeah.
things will happen in their own way and solutions are not happening overnight, right? And it can. So for me, the smartest thing I did on my patients is I moved out of industry. That was one of my most patient activities, right?
Say more.
Because
Say
I
more about
know
that.
this could take another 20, 30, 40 years and I'm not going to be around, right? So we need to build institutions that will be around to see these things through, right? And I'm so blessed with phenomenal people, phenomenal organization, phenomenal capability, and everybody is taking the journey ahead because yes, some of these things are going to take forever and ever and ever because you're pragmatic. You're just pragmatic and things are not going to happen overnight. So the
But you,
pragmatism
yeah.
matters.
So there's pragmatism as well as disruption,
Yes.
right? Because you want to be a
So
disruptor.
fearlessness, the ability to take risk and fearlessness leads to your no fear of disruption. And of course, this is a good point to bring out spiritual practice,
Yeah.
right?
So talk to me about that because I think
Yeah.
there's something about wanting to be a disruptor, creating your own parallel system, but also being pragmatic about the way that it comes about, right?
Somewhere very early in my journey, Deepa, and it
Mm.
was like in my most pitiful time of my company, where I used to pay people 2 months late salary, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Very tiny company, really struggling. I did everything myself. Even then, on the days I was the most miserable, I've said this many times. I would like 8 people in my office, and my cousin used to call it Gobar Gully. She's saying, Tera daftar, your office is in Gobar Gully because Gobar is cow dung. And she says, all cow dung in this little lane where your office
Yeah.
is. And I would drag myself out to go to work because of my team. So even then, I knew how important my team was because the self awareness is important. Maybe I had some skill of self awareness. I don't know what it was, but I know
Where did that come from?
maybe it was I started looking at spiritual practice when I was 15, 14, 16. I don't know. I've
Hmm.
always been a little spiritually inclined, right? Maybe it's my grandfather's blessing. Yeah, my mom and dad would go for movies, and I would sit in his room, and he'd go home, home, home from when I was 9, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe it's that. All I can say is that my self awareness, I was like, okay, I've forgotten what I was saying. Can't remember. What was it?
The design and
No, the team.
the team.
That I would get up, and the only thing that would give me energy was, oh my God, those people are sitting in office. Oh, yeah, I can go and talk to them. And I would get up and go. And they gave me so much energy. So, industry is all about, from the beginning, it's been about its teams and its people and the not feeling alone It's in our head that we are alone. So I didn't make my, I always felt I would go, I'd talk to someone, and I would feel less alone. So this is never about Neelam's journey. It can never be about Neelam's journey. But Neelam was not alone. Now, how today I can spiritually articulate it better, because I'm now a practitioner of Advait. And in Advait, they say Ghat Ghat Vasi, that you are not your personality, you are the universal consciousness. And this universal consciousness is in everyone. It's in the trees, it's in rocks, it's in stones, it's in all the people around you, right? And Ghat Vasi, it's in everyone. And maybe right from then, I was getting the energy from my team in some way, and I was able to go and make it through. And I've done it, and I could exit industry because I said, I've done this for 40 years, long journey ahead. Neelam Chhiber needs to go because Neelam Chhiber should focus on a spiritual practice. The Bangalore in traffic is getting on my nerves. I think Bangalore in traffic was 50% of reason why I retired, to be very frank. Okay. And I said,
Again,
I can't get into this traffic anymore. And that's it. And
but
yes,
talk about, but then again, right? Because I think you're glossing over, I think, the amount of intentionality of what it took to do that exit responsibly. And not a lot of founders do it in a conscious, intentional, or considered way, right?
yes, yes.
And
The
I
sense of
think,
responsibility was immense because we need to have a very smooth transition, because we owe it to the communities we have worked with for 40 years. Not
mm,
always through the organization, but in our heads, right? The CEO, Nehru George Abraham, is a has was a social activist, is deeply involved with rural communities, women. He's lived in the villages. He's worked with the poorest of the poor in North Karnataka. Each and every one of my leaders, I will not take names now, they are very emotionally committed
yeah.
to the job at hand. And the transition is necessary for everyone's time, for everyone's energy that they put in over the years, right? And
Mm,
of the organization and also of the producers, right? We are building something, we believe it will take much longer to build, and therefore we need a very smooth transition, right? And it's
mm,
my responsibility to make that happen. So then I started talking at the age of 58, which is bang 2020 in COVID. And my team said, hello, this doesn't happen overnight. I said, okay, 60. So then we got in a consultant, Mercury Urval, a large global HR firm. We paid them money. They did our transition plan, and we coached leaders. We coached next level. CEO Poor Soul at one time had two coaches, one mentor, and endless input going in. And that's it. And I, of course, was coached by my spiritual practice.
mm.
I tell everyone, without that, I don't think I could have ever made the transition. And what did the spiritual practice say? You are not the center of the universe. You will love everyone around you. That's it. So that was it. I could leave, and there was a very thorough process that was followed. I would say that 23 October is when my CEO took over.
Hmm.
2020 October is when I started talking about it. So 3 years was we took
Yeah.
over the transition. And for 1 year, I was reasonably active. My role is to be my CEO's mentor. That's it. I never call him, he calls me. And I never have anything to say to him. If he has something to say to me, he comes to me. He always comes to me when he has a very big problem, to just share that
Mm.
there is a problem. That's all. He doesn't come to me for answers. But it's important that there is a place where he can unburden. And I'm
But
the
there's,
safe space for him to unburden. That's it.
yeah. And one of the things that this makes me think of, and I've been, as you know, I've been thinking about what it takes to have conversations, right? And the characteristics of those. Humility is a big part of your journey, not just in terms of you as a leader, like you've just been describing, right? And the relationship that you've now got with your new CEO, but in also in honoring the local community, observing the local community with rural artisans, and this spiritual practice of not being the center of the universe is a massive lesson in understand your place in an ecosystem with
Yes.
humility.
Yes. And having said that, Deepa, if you ask my husband, there were stages when I was very non-humble.
Okay. So talk about those. Okay. This is
Yeah, yeah,
nice. I
yeah, yeah.
like this
So I have been
balance.
extremely territorial,
Yeah.
and I've been a terrible person also. But like I'm saying, it's a journey. Yeah, I've been extremely protective about my turf at times, right? But it's a learning journey, and you have to forgive yourself. I think the only advice I give all the leaders who work under me is forgive yourself. This is one of Buddha's tenets, that it's one of the 3 to 5 or to 7 cardinal sins against yourself, self blame.
Mm,
The day I read that, it really changed my life, because I used to really blame myself for the state of my finances, for the state of where my organization was. I'm taking too much risk, I'm taking on too much. And I was in pretty bad shape at times, right?
mm,
And self blame is the worst thing. And therefore, we just need to be more kind to ourselves. We will all make mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes, tons and tons and tons. It's only out of every mistake that we've come up with the next solution and the next solution, right? And that's exactly what I tell my CEO, that don't lose your entrepreneurial spirit. Make your mistakes. Yeah, we lose some money. It's okay, but the learning that will come from that. And you can't sit around and blame yourself. What's the point? You
mm.
know that something hasn't gone right. What more can one want? You know it, you're self-aware. And that's enough.
And
That's
I
more
think there's
than enough.
something about that acceptance of failure, right? Or the failure is not failing, it's learning. There's a
Yes.
reframe in that as well,
Failure is
right?
learning. Yes.
Um, and so for people who are starting ventures or thinking about wanting to create parallel universes, right? Because from a finance perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, some things look pretty dark at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Put
But
one foot after the other.
mm,
Keep putting one foot after the other and walk on the path. Now, that path may not always be straight, but there are certain things to the path that are essential. Your motive.
mm,
Ensure your motive is clean. Yeah, fair. I mean, a lot of young people I say, but we also have to earn a living. Obviously. Yes, my motive is I will earn a living, but I will earn a clean living. Yes, I will do good by this, this, and this. Yes, whatever. Just chart out the path, must have some integrity, and put one foot after the next, after the next. That's all there is to it.
final note then um, is what are you feeling optimistic about going
Mm,
forward for the sector?
mm.
And this kind of alternative parallel universe creation.
I'm feeling optimistic about the fact that the technology hopefully going to enable more and more distributed growth. Technologies are here to make it happen. Um, and I'm optimistic about the will of human beings to have a better world. And I'm optimistic about the fact that ah, भगवान ने सृष्टि बनाई है भगवान चला लेगा.
Translate that for people.
God has made the universe and God will run it.
On that note, I think that's a beautiful place to close. Um, Thank you for doing this. I feel like we could have gone down very many rabbit holes. We've kept it pretty for you and me in conversation, we've kept it pretty sensible. So I want to thank you and
Thank you, Deepa. Good girl, good girl.